70s, Congress, military changed their policies and began allowing women to serve in that capacity, this being one of them. In fact, our museum director, Miss Yvonne Morris, was one of the last missile crew commanders to serve right here in this very site. She sat right there in that chair. So, even today, Minuteman crews still have women on those. Some crews are entirely made up of women. So you're here to represent all the women who have served in this capacity over all these years. Well done. Commander, your role was primarily carried out here. This was your baby for the next 24 hours. It'll be yours for about the next 15 minutes. You were in charge of the facility and all the crew members. It was a supervisory role.
Name?
Loretta.
L-O-R-E-T-T-E. Got it. Major or captain?
Major. She went right up through the ranks.
That's all right.
Yep. She wanted the big bucks. Your duties were carried out here at this console. You were basically monitoring the different operating systems by way of these indicator lights. Down below were the different operating systems for the complex itself. The middle row here was for all the operating systems on the missile. Top row was the one you hoped would never light up, because if it did, then you knew you were in the second half of World War III. Things got serious very quickly. Over here you had different communications controls. Over on this side you had some re-entry vehicle controls and indicators. You had targeting information. And over here you had the controls for the blast holes. This was basically your role. The other officer was the deputy commander. They carried out their duties over here. Their primary duties were, first of all, to support the commander. They were also in charge of safety, security, and communications. One of their primary duties was to track the location and the movement of all personnel on the site, whether it was crew members or maintenance. They needed to know where they were in the event of a crisis situation, once again, for safety and security. They did so on this locator board with, for all things, a grease pencil. They were also in charge of communication radio antennas. The antennas that I pointed out to you up above, some were hardened, they were in silos. They could control them by way of this panel here. As needed, they could raise them or lower them. They were also in charge of the launch clock. Missiles were launched at a given time, calculated time. This is a mechanical clock, accurate to within a second. Set to Greenwich Mean Time. Military called it Zulu time. It's a universal time. Confusion in the military is not a good thing. And so this eliminated all that confusion. No time zones, no AMs, no PMs. The time on the space station is the same as it is in China, as it is in Russia, as it is at the Winter Olympics in North Korea, as it is right now at the Titan II Missile Museum. Universal time. Military uses this to coordinate all operations, exercises, maneuvers, and missile launches. One of the enlisted personnel was the MFT, Missile Facilities Technician. They were the superintendent or the handyman of the facility. They were in charge of all the mechanical operations here, heating, cooling, ventilation, list goes on. They did basic maintenance, diagnostics, testing, light repair work. The other enlisted personnel was the BMAT, Ballistic Missile Analyst Technician. They were basically kind of like the MFT, except all of their duties were missile related. They only focused on whatever the missile required, testing, diagnostics, that kind of thing. Any repairs that were out of their realm, they would dispatch a maintenance crew from the local Air Force base to come in and do the repairs. These were missile launchers, they weren't repair people. Commander Loretta, one of your first orders of business upon arriving for your alert took place right over here at the emergency war order safe for the changing of the locks. These were locks that were assigned to the officers. Each officer had their own with their own top secret combination. Outgoing officers would remove the locks. Incoming and the outgoing would inventory the contents, specifically the launch authentication cards and the launch keys, amongst some other top secret information. But those were the two primary ones. Once everyone was satisfied, you installed your locks only to be opened in agreement in the event of an emergency crisis situation or another crew changeover. The facility had two critical operating systems. You can imagine one of these was communications. The crew needed to be able to communicate with the outside world. Most importantly, they needed to be able to receive messages, specifically a launch order. This panel here was the different receivers for the 4 radio systems that equipped the facility. These were the receivers for the antennas up above. The crew was constantly receiving messages, training orders, routine communications, things like that. They were always alerted to an incoming message by way of this sound. When they heard that, they knew there was a broadcast coming over the system. There were codes that alerted the crew as to the nature of the message they were receiving so that they knew what to expect. Commander, the rest of you here, I want you to listen for the first 2 characters in this message.
Alpha 2-3.
You just got a raise. Alpha 2. For our purposes here, we're just going to assume that Alpha 2 was the launch order code. When you heard that coming over the system, it's when the hair on your neck kind of stands up. Heart rate starts pumping, adrenaline's going, and it gets serious. We'll get back to this here in a few minutes. The other critical system, electrical supplies. This panel here, these 2 panels here allowed the crew to monitor and control the electrical services throughout the complex. Primary source, local utility company. You would think that because this is a military installation, 9 megaton warhead out there, that they would have had preferential treatment, uninterrupted service. No. Just like the rest of us, they experienced power outages. It was not guaranteed. Air Force kind of anticipated this. They put a massive diesel generator out in the 3rd level of the silo. It would kick on and first indication of a power fluctuation. Only problem is it took about 60 seconds to reach full power. 60 seconds doesn't seem like a whole lot. Around here, it might as well be a year, because there were critical operating systems on the missile itself that could not be without power for even a second. That's where the 2 batteries down below come in. They would kick on instantaneously. They would cover that gap from the diesel generator or supply service if the other 2 sources had failed. They could sustain the complex, and they could even carry out the missile launch if necessary. Bottom line is that these facilities were never without uninterrupted power. This board here basically allowed the crew to diagnose and test the operating systems on the missile. It assured missile readiness in the event of a launch. It also allowed for undestructive testing and diagnostics of the different systems. Up above, this was a panel, the alarm panel for the different gypsies, the radar system that you saw up above, maybe in the video, kind of silver horn-shaped devices. That's the sound that the crew would hear down below if there was a breach or some kind of activity going on up above. The crew would never go up to investigate. Once again, they would dispatch Air Force Patrol and see what was going on. For the most part, it's 4-legged critters. A lot of 4-legged critters walking around in the day with criminal trespass records. Either way, they had to come and investigate. Nothing was taken for granted. The only visual access to the site that the crew had outside of this control room was through this TV monitor, which was a camera that was watching you as you came down through the access port to identify any incoming personnel. Every other area within the site was monitored by way of these status indicator lights. The only way that the crew knew that something was wrong or needed to be repaired or whatever it is that may have been happening at the time. This panel here basically was called the war board. It allowed the crew to control the types of bursts for the warhead itself. It kind of provided a more general visual access to the launch sequence, kind of what the commander would have had going on right in front of her there. And then this panel here, probably the most important electronic device on the whole facility. If you remember from the video, there was a butterfly valve. 4 of these on the stage 1 engine. All 4 had to be open in order for the missile to enable itself. Once they were open, propellants, the fuel and the oxidizer would mix, create a volatile explosion, which would allow for the launch. No pilot lights, no fuses, no ignition switches. Just 4 butterfly valves open. However, one of these had an electronic box on it. It was a lock that prevented it from opening. The only way to open it was to enter a 6-digit code. A code that was never on site nor at the local Air Force base. It arrived through the launch order. 6 digits, however, each of these wheels had 16 characters on it. A possible combination of just slightly less than 17 million, of which only one would work. It's hardwired to the Air Force base. So if anybody started tampering with this, they knew right away. It had 7 tries before it would lock itself down. Nobody knew how many tries had been attempted prior to that. So, Commander, if that 7th try happened on your watch, you'd be reading the want ads for a different career opportunity.
From prison.
Air Force took this very seriously. Okay, over here. These panels were for the guidance system. At the time, all of them were filled with electronics. This was supposed to be a 10-year program. After 10 years, it couldn't keep up with the repairs. Malfunctions were becoming more common, repairs were becoming impossible because the parts were no longer manufactured and were becoming scarce. Well, as you can imagine, Air Force cannot have 54 Titan II standing around and no way of getting them to their destination. As luck would have it, they reached out to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who had just developed a guidance system for the 747 aircraft. This was back in the 70s. Intercontinental flight. They did a few adaptations. They were able to come and retrofit the panels and the guidance system, and they put Titan II back on alert. Today's standards, you could probably replace that panel with even my cell phone. What's that, right? Yeah. Targeting information was entered by way of paper tape. This is Mylar for our purposes here. Simple. Thinking, this is the military, state-of-the-art technology. What's going on here? Paper tape. Fact is, you cannot alter it. Electronically, magnetically, if it falls on the ground, somehow it tears, the decoder won't read it. Commander Loretta, you drop this out in the parking lot on your way in, someone picks it up, you have no idea what it is. Primitive? Yes. Secure? Absolutely. Still used by the military for certain applications today. Over here, Commander, see here you got 3 targeting lights there, but target 2 is the one that's illuminated. That was the default target for this missile here at this complex. What is the location there of target 2?
In the middle.
You just got another raise. That is the absolute correct answer. The best answer. I don't know. The crew didn't know. Didn't really want to know. Military didn't want them to know. Any of that kind of information they were afraid would jeopardize or influence their decision and would not allow them to complete their mission. To this day, that information remains classified. Those targets may still be targets today. Crew did know a little bit about targeting. However, they knew that it was between targets 1 and 3. Looking at the burst selection, they also knew that it was a ground burst, meaning that it would have detonated either 1,000 feet or on impact with terra firma, creating a crater about 3/4 to a mile wide, about a mile or about 500 feet deep. So they knew that they were digging out something buried into the ground. Command center, weapons depot, who knows? Speculation. Airburst would have created a burst about 14,000 miles above the surface, taking out an area of about 900 square miles. 2 Los Angeleses, a New York, a Chicago. 1 bomb. Pretty powerful. All right, so here we are. You've done all of your inspections, you've done all your diagnostics, you have some downtime, you might be drinking a soda, some coffee, you might even be upstairs taking a nap. All of a sudden, here comes that launch order. This one's Alpha 2. Things get real serious very quickly. If that's the case, you take your booklet. I'm the deputy commander, I take mine. We start copying down all of those graphics that were coming over the message. In this message, we have the valve codes, we have the launch time, and we have an authentication. Just because it's coming through, well, we switch. We check each other's work, make sure everything is accurate. If it is, it's valid. Not necessarily authentic. Somebody could have hacked the system. This is when we go and open up the war order safe. We pull out an authenticator card that would match the code in the message. Open it up. We take out the authentication code. If these match what came over the communication, then we know we're at war. Second half. We didn't start the war, we finished it. Now it was our job to do so. We calculate our launch time. We retrieve the keys. For our purposes here, they're already inserted. Far enough apart so I can't turn both of them at the same time. Not one person can launch this on their own. Spring loaded, so if I tried to turn this one and run across to turn that one, they would shut themselves off. They had to be held for about 5 seconds, at which point the sequence would begin. You ready? We do some role playing here.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. We start talking. Okay. We're going to switch. Okay. Commander, you have a valid launch order. You say, I confirm.
I confirm.
Commander, we take out the cards, we verify, it's authentic. Commander, we have an authentic launch order.
I confirm.
Only allowable by who?
President.
President of the United States. Commander, we've calculated our launch time for now. I confirm.
I confirm.
Commander, we also have a correct butterfly valve code.
I confirm.
And you say, enter the code.
Enter the code.
So the BMAT would come over here, they start wheeling in the code, listening to what the commander's saying, they enable it, if it illuminates, now we're really good to go. Missile is enabled, butterfly valves are good to open, lift off. All right, only thing left is to turn the keys. You say, place your left hand on the key.
Place your left hand on the
You
key.
do the same.
My hands be left.
Yes, okay. Okay. You say, on my count, turn and hold.
On my count, turn and hold.
Now you're going to say 3, 2, 1, turn and hold, and you're going to turn it until you see that first little green light illuminate there. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, hold. Turn and hold.
Turn and hold.
Go ahead. Turn it, hold it, watch for the green light there,
Okay.
release. That's it. That's simple.
She's moving.
Stuff's
That
hap-
deceptively simple.
Stuff's happening.
No sparklers, no fireworks, no dramatic music, no red button to push.
Does this shutter?
That's
Does
all.
this
motor.
shutter? No.
You started a sequence, it takes 58 seconds to complete, you cannot reverse it. No oops button, no I didn't mean to do that switch, no I want to take it back lever. It's gone. Like a bullet from a gun, once you pull the trigger, you can't bring it back. In this time frame, batteries are powering up out in the missile, independent power source. It develops its own power source. Silo door opens, not that we can see here, feel it, but it broke the tipsy barriers, the radar. Guidance go, missile now has a mind of its own, headed to target 2. Engines are firing, reservoirs filling up with water, and as expected, fire in the hole. Missile is launching. Finally, liftoff. 58 seconds. In about 35 minutes, some 6,000 miles away, target 2 will cease to exist, identified only by the crater left in its place. Done deal, sir. They didn't feel it. Because of the distance, because of the blast doors, the noise in here, and the thickness of the walls, did not feel it. So, I don't think any of us here did either. So let's go see if we've got a missile out there still on that side. Commander, here you go. Commander Loretta,
Oh, sorry.
that's for you. Read what it says there in red, please.
I turned the key.
Yes, you did. Let's go see if we've got a missile out there.